Good evening, my dear friends. Tonight I want to speak to you of something that touches a place in the human heart so private that many of you have not spoken of it aloud, even to those nearest you. I want to speak of the one who left, the one who closed the door, the one whose chair at the table is empty and whose voice you still hear sometimes in the silence between two thoughts. There is a teaching about this matter that the world has forgotten, and that even those who follow the law of assumption have so often misunderstood. Lean closer, my friends. Let me tell you what I mean. There are two women in this great city tonight. I have chosen women for the sake of the story, but the truth I am about to share belongs to every soul, in every body, in every age. Each of these women has loved a particular man. Each of these women has been left by him. Each, for some months now, has been carrying within her the same quiet absence, the same unanswered telephone, the same empty doorway, the same long evenings in which the mind rehearses, over and over, the words she might have said, the gestures she might have made, the small misjudgments that perhaps cost her everything. The first woman, sitting in her quiet room tonight, is doing what the world has taught her to do, and what most teachers of the law also sadly instruct her to do. She is straining toward him. She is whispering his name. She is visualizing his face. She is repeating to herself with her eyes squeezed shut that he is hers, that he is returning, that the telephone will ring tonight, that the door will open this week. She is, in the language of the law, manifesting him, and she is exhausted. And he is no closer than he was a month ago. And in some hidden chamber of her own heart, she is beginning to suspect that perhaps the more she pulls, the further away he goes. The second woman, sitting in her own quiet room tonight, has done something altogether different. She has stopped. Not stopped loving him, and that, my friends, the heart cannot do by command, but she has stopped reaching for him. She has, with great quiet patience, turned her attention away from his absence and back toward the soul she was before he ever entered her life. She is reading again this evening, a book she set aside the year they met. She has placed fresh flowers on her own table, not for him, not as a sign to anyone, but because she has remembered that she likes flowers on her table. She is at peace or near it, and tomorrow morning, my friends, or perhaps the morning after, she will receive the very thing the first woman has been straining for. She will receive it without strain. She will receive it as a returning bird returns to a tree it once knew, without announcement, without fanfare. The door will simply open. The voice will simply be there, and she will not be amazed. She will only quietly recognize what has come home. Why? Why should the woman who has stopped reaching receive what the woman who reaches cannot? It seems unjust. It seems almost cruel, as though the universe rewards indifference and punishes love. But I tell you, my friends, the law is neither cruel nor unjust. It is simply exact. And tonight I want to unfold for you, with all the care this matter deserves, why the specific person you long for returns at exactly the moment you cease to require their return. Let me first tell you of a young woman I knew in 1951. Margaret was her name, 28 years old, a school teacher in New York with kind eyes and a quiet voice. She came to me after a Sunday lecture and waited at the back of the hall until everyone had left. When at last we were alone, she said, almost in a whisper, "Mr. Goddard, there is a man. We were to be married. He left me 7 months ago for reasons I still do not understand. I have read your books. I have heard your lectures. I have been doing the techniques every night for nearly 5 months. He has not contacted me once. I do not know what I am doing wrong." I asked her to sit with me a moment. I asked her, "Margaret, when you do the techniques, what is the feeling in your chest? Is it the warm feeling of one who already has? Or is it a tightness, a kind of pleading?" She lowered her eyes. She said after some time, "It is a pleading, Mr. Goddard. Even when I tell myself it is not, it is. Every night when I imagine him telephoning me, there is a pleading underneath. Please come back. I cannot find a way to remove it." And there, my friends, was the entire matter. The technique was not the problem. The voice was not the problem. The visualization was not the problem. The pleading underneath was the problem. For Margaret was not impressing upon her subconscious mind the state of having him. She was impressing upon it the state of needing him. And the law, which is exact, was giving her with great precision exactly what she was impressing. More days of needing him, more nights of needing him, more weeks of needing him. The law cannot tell the difference between a wish and a longing. It can only register the dominant feeling. And Margaret's dominant feeling, beneath all her best technique, was, "I do not have him. I asked her then a question that I believe she had not been asked in all the 7 months since he had gone. I asked her, "Margaret, who were you before you met him?" She looked up at me. She did not answer at once. She said slowly, I was a woman who liked to walk in the park on Sunday mornings. I had a friend, a woman named Helen, with whom I used to take long walks. I was reading the works of Emerson when I met him. I had begun a small notebook of my own thoughts. I was content. And as she spoke, my friends, something in her face very gently shifted. The pleading went out of her eyes. For a moment she remembered. I told her, Margaret, that is your work, not the technique, not the visualization, not the imaginal conversation. Your work is to find that woman again. Walk in the park on Sunday mornings. Telephone Helen. Open the Emerson. Take up the notebook. Become again, in the simplest and most patient way, the woman you were before you met him. Not in order to win him back, that you must release. In order to come home to yourself. And the law will do the rest in its own time, in its own way, without your needing to lift another finger toward him. Margaret was, I think, somewhat disappointed. She had come, like so many do, hoping for a more elaborate technique, a more powerful affirmation, perhaps a phrase to whisper before sleep. I had given her instead what looked like a withdrawal from the work entirely. But she trusted me, and she went home, and she did what I had asked. She telephoned Helen. She walked in the park. She opened the notebook, and she stopped, quite deliberately, and with some difficulty, she stopped reaching for him. 6 weeks later, my friends, the man telephoned. He had been traveling. He had been thinking. He had, as he put it to her, missed her in a way he could not describe. Within 4 months, they were reconciled. Within the year, they were married. And when Margaret wrote to me some time afterwards, she said something I have never forgotten. She said, Mr. Goddard, the strangest part is this. By the time he called, I no longer needed him to call. I would have been quite all right if he had not. I had become myself again. And the call, when it came, was a beautiful thing, but it was no longer a saving thing. That is the signature, my friends. That is always the signature. The manifestation arrives as a gladness, not as a rescue. Now mark this carefully, for it is the very heart of what I am sharing with you tonight. You cannot manifest the specific person from the state of needing them. The state of needing them is the very state in which they are absent from you. To impress that state upon the subconscious is to impress upon it their continued absence. The first thing the law gives any soul is more of the state from which they imagine. And if you imagine from the state of I am the one who waits for him, the law will give you tirelessly more waiting. It cannot do otherwise. It is a mirror, and a mirror does not negotiate. The cure is not, as some teachers say, to pretend you do not care. Pretended detachment is detachment performed in front of the law, and the law is not fooled by performances. The law sees at every moment the dominant feeling beneath the performance. The cure is not pretense. The cure is the genuine recovery of the self that existed before the loss. The self that had its own books, its own walks, its own friendships, its own pleasures, its own mornings. That self was, in some real sense, more available to be loved than the diminished self that has been pleading for 7 months at a closed door. And the specific person, my friends, returns to that earlier self. They return to the one they first met, not the desperate version that has formed in their absence. I want to give you 3 principles about this practice, 3 things you must understand if you are to wield this teaching well. They are not techniques in the ordinary sense. They are turnings of the heart, but they are more powerful than any technique I could give you tonight. The first is this. You must release the role of the one who is waiting. This is not the same as releasing the love. The love you cannot release by command, and you should not try. But the role, the identity of the one whose entire life has narrowed to a single empty doorway, that role you must lay down. The role of the waiter is itself a state. It is the state of incompleteness. And as long as you occupy that state, the law has no choice but to confirm it. To lay down the role, you must do what Margaret did. You must remember the life you had before the role began. You must open one book you have not opened in months. You must telephone one friend you have neglected. You must take one walk in one place that belongs to you and not to the memory of him or her. You begin to step out of the role one small recovered pleasure at a time. The second is this. You must understand that the specific person is not the source of your peace. They never were. The peace they seemed to bring you was a peace that was already in you, which their presence merely permitted you to feel. When they left, the peace did not leave with them. It was hidden, certainly. It was buried under the shock of the absence. But it remained. It is in you now, my friends, as you sit listening to me. It has been in you the whole time. The work is to dig down through the absence and find it again. And the moment you find it, the moment you discover that you can feel calm, can feel whole, can feel quietly glad of an evening, even without the call you have been waiting for, at that very moment, the law releases its hold on the absence. It can no longer reflect a wholeness you have failed to feel. You have begun to feel it. And the world must therefore reflect it. The third is this: when the manifestation comes, it will come in a manner that surprises you not at all. There will be no cinematic moment. There will be no pounding heart. There will very often be a small, ordinary thing. A telephone ringing while you are doing the dishes, a letter arriving with the morning post, a chance meeting in a place you had stopped expecting to encounter them. And you will receive it almost as you receive the news that it has begun to rain. You will say inwardly, yes, of course. The naturalness, my friends, is the signature. The naturalness is the proof that the law has worked. If you find yourself, when the call comes, calm rather than shocked, that is not a sign of dimmed love. That is the sign that you manifested correctly. You impressed the state of having them. The world has now caught up with the state. There is nothing to be amazed about. You are already there. Let me tell you of a gentleman I knew in 1956, a man named Thomas in Los Angeles, perhaps 35 years old, who had loved a woman named Eleanor for nearly 4 years and lost her to a misunderstanding so painful that the two had not spoken in 11 months. Thomas came to me after a lecture and told me he had been doing the techniques every night for half a year. Eleanor had not contacted him. He was, by the time I met him, a man very nearly broken. I asked Thomas the same question I had asked Margaret in slightly different words. I said, "Thomas, before you met Eleanor, what was the thing in your life you most loved that had nothing to do with her?" He thought for a long moment. He said, "I used to take photographs, black and white photographs in the evenings of the streets of this city. I have not picked up the camera in nearly 5 years. Eleanor never quite understood it. So I gradually set it aside. I said to him, Thomas, your work for the next 60 days is not to think of Eleanor, not to imagine her, not to whisper her name before sleep. Your work is to take up the camera, walk the streets in the evenings, photograph what catches your eye, develop the film, hang the prints to dry. Become again the man who took photographs in this city. If Eleanor is to return to you, she will return to that man, not to the man who has been waiting for her. Show the law that man, be that man, and let her go." Thomas did this. He told me afterward that for the first 3 weeks, the camera felt heavy in his hands, and he wept sometimes in the darkroom for no clear reason. By the 4th week, he had stopped weeping. By the 6th week, he had developed a small body of work he was very quietly proud of. He was no longer doing the techniques. He had, in some genuine sense, forgotten them. He was simply living. On the 54th day, Eleanor telephoned. There had been a misunderstanding deeper than either of them had realized. She had heard through a friend that Thomas had been seen taking photographs again, and something in that piece of news had struck her with great force. She wanted to see him. They met. They reconciled. They were married within the year. And when, much later, I asked Thomas what he had felt the moment her voice came on the line, he said only this: "It was as though she had been gone for a long weekend, Mr. Goddard." There was no shock. There was only a quiet warmth and the recognition of a friend. That is again the signature. A quiet warmth, the recognition of a friend. No drama, no amazement. The manifestation arrives as a gladness, not as a rescue, because by the time it arrives, the soul no longer requires rescue. Now let me give you the practice plainly so that you may begin tonight. There need be no elaborate preparation. You need only your bed, your pillow, and a single piece of honesty. Tonight, before sleep, do not do the techniques you have been doing for them. Do not whisper their name. Do not visualize their face. Do not construct the imaginal conversation in which they call you. For one night, my friends, set all of that aside. Instead, ask yourself this single question and answer it honestly. Who was I before I met them? Not the version of you that was lonely or unfulfilled, not the version of you that was waiting to be rescued, but the version of you that had quiet pleasures, particular books, particular friends, particular Sunday mornings, particular small ambitions. Bring that earlier soul into the room with you. Sit with them a moment. Ask what they have been waiting for you to remember. Tomorrow, do one small thing that belongs to that earlier soul. Open the book. Telephone the friend. Take the walk. Buy the flowers for your own table. Take up the camera if there was a camera. Begin the notebook again if there was a notebook. Do not announce it to anyone. Do not post it anywhere. Do this small thing only for the one to whom it once belonged, yourself. And then continue. Each day, one small thing. Each day, one further return to the soul you were. You are not abandoning the specific person. You are doing the only work that has ever, in the history of the law, brought a specific person back. You are becoming, again, the soul they fell in love with. And the law, which can do nothing but reflect, will reflect that soul to that soul. You may, after a time, find yourself one evening realizing with a kind of quiet astonishment that you have not thought of them today. You will not be alarmed by this. You will not panic and try to think of them again to prove your love is intact. You will let the day stand. That day, my friends, is the day the manifestation begins to move. That is the day the law, having seen at last the wholeness it has been waiting to mirror, begins to arrange the bridge of incidents that will carry that soul back to you. And when they come, when the telephone rings, when the letter arrives, when the chance meeting in the unlikely place occurs, receive them as Thomas received Eleanor. As one receives a friend who has been gone for a long weekend, with a quiet warmth, with recognition, without drama. The law has done its work. There is nothing to be amazed about. You are simply seeing in the world what was already true within you, that the soul you are, the soul they first loved, was never lost. They have only at last caught up with what you had remembered. Now, my friends, let me lift this teaching to its highest level before we part. There is a great paradox at the center of all true love, and most souls discover it only by walking through the long valley of an absence. The paradox is this: the one you long for is not the source of your wholeness. They are, when love is real, the witness of your wholeness. The two are entirely different things. A soul who treats another as the source of their wholeness places upon that other an unbearable weight, and the relationship, even when it appears to succeed, succeeds only by the suffocation of one party for the propping up of the other. But a soul who has remembered their own wholeness and who comes into the presence of another only to be witnessed in it, gladly, freely, with no pleading underneath, that soul is loved, my friends. That soul cannot help but be loved. The law arranges it. The bridge of incidents arranges it. The whole quiet machinery of existence arranges it. The absence, then, of the specific person is not your enemy. It is, if you will let it be, your great teacher. It is the hour in which you are being asked to do the one thing you should have done all along before you ever met them, to remember the soul you are when no one is watching. Do that work, my friends. Do it patiently. Do it without expectation. Do it for yourself and not for them. And the world will arrange what only the world can arrange. Remember the two women in this great city. The first woman strained and pleaded and imagined harder and grew thinner in the soul, and the door remained closed. The second woman stopped reaching, opened the book, telephoned the friend, walked in the park, placed flowers on her own table, and quietly remembered the soul she was before. The door, when it opened almost without her noticing. By then she was at home in herself, and the one returning to her was simply a friend coming home to a house that had at last remembered it was a house. Be the second woman tonight, my friends. Be the second man. Lay down the role of the one who waits. Pick up the small thing that belongs to the soul you were before. Walk gently back into your own life, the life that was yours before the absence, the life that is still yours beneath the absence. The one you long for is not lost. They are merely waiting, in the strange grammar of the law, for the soul they once loved to remember itself. Remember yourself. The rest is the law's affair, and the law has never, in all the years I have watched it work, failed a soul who genuinely came home. Good evening, my friends.